So you're probably wondering, why is there a helicopter on a grouse moor?
Never before in history have we been so aware of our carbon footprint. And in fact, the grouse moors of Great Britain are doing their bit to capture as much carbon as possible. Today, we're going to have a little look at what these guys are doing for Mother Nature.
Peatlands are the UK's largest store of carbon, storing up to 8 years of the UK's emissions output in that precious substance. The waterlogged and acidic conditions in the peat prevent decomposition, which is what locks that carbon in. Because of this, keeping the peatlands wet has been highlighted as an environmental priority. These are the grouse moors of Great Britain.
Why did they drain the moors in the first place?
In the 1940s or 50s, after the war, they were really struggling. They wanted a higher food production, so they wanted to drain the moors so you could put a higher headage of sheep on the moors, because farmers were paid on the headage, so they were paid per sheep they could have on the moor. So
By the government?
By the government, yeah. Now kind of figures we might have 400 or 500 sheep on the moor, but in 1940, 50 they put up to 1,500 sheep.
It soon became apparent that this increased burden on the moorland landscapes was not only detrimental to the biodiversity, but also the soft peat earth couldn't handle the volumes of water being sent down these drainage ditches. And over the years, they eroded to enormous sizes.
So this is what the grips became?
So we're studying what used to be a really small little stream, probably only a couple of foot deep, and now it's washed out to this because there was a grip that was put in the 40s further up. All the water from the grip further up here had to go somewhere, so they channeled it into an existing watercourse, which was this, but obviously it was nothing like the size and the depth it is now. The amount of water coming down that grip now has washed it out till this.
It's impressive.
Yeah.
In a bad way.
Exactly, yeah. All this exposed peat, obviously about 3 metres deep and probably 3-4 metres wide at the tops, and opens up further down. The peat's a huge store of carbon, and it grows in 1 millimetre a year in ideal conditions through degrading of sphagnum moss and heather as well. So I think the amount of thousands of years of peat has been washed away here already and gone down the stream into the main river. We actually want the water level to be back up right near the top surface, like 6 inches really, 6 inches a foot, keep the water up there and re-wet the moors.
Times have changed, however, and in the last 4 decades, moorland owners and gamekeepers have been working hard to try and restore these rare environments to their former glory.
So what is peatland restoration?
Basically it's kind of undoing all the bad work that's been done from the 20s, 30s, right through to probably the 60s, when the government put money in to try and create better grazing habitat for sheep, for higher food production, and also just undoing some of the damage that was caused by like the lead mining, especially up in the dales here. Some of the main methods we use are grip blocking, and then blocking also the wider gullies with timber dams, and then any coir rolls where they've got water run off across a flat area, and then brashing on any bare peat or exposed peat areas.
So this brings me to the helicopter. The ground here is very soft, and any attempt to move large quantities of rocks around the moor would likely lead to further damage and vehicles getting stuck on a regular basis. So, to minimise impact on vegetation and the environment, a helicopter is here instead.
So the helicopter's bringing the rocks from the bottom and bringing them up here?
Yeah, they are, yeah. It's pretty much a cost-effective way of bringing the stone up here. You can place them directly in exactly the spot you need it, and obviously there's no damage to vegetation around it or the peat hags like that. It's a stone dam, so it's a semi-permeable dam, so it lets water through, but then backs up slightly, and that hopefully creates a bit of sediment, and then over time that will vegetate probably into sphagnum moss and just slow the water down gradually. These are put down actually every 20 metres up this little back at the minute.
And these are going all over the estate?
Yeah, pretty much all over. Any kind of semi-natural or man-made watercourses, these are put on where you're down to sediment already. Anywhere where it's still deep peat on a normal grip, they're using like a standard, like a peat grip to block that up. So that's the idea. That's what they put these pretty much everywhere throughout the whole estate.
It's not only the big gullies they're blocking, but each of the individual small drains, called grips, has to be blocked in order to achieve the best quality of restoration. This is done with a digger, creating a dam made of the precious peat every few metres, a process that has been carried out by shooting estates for decades.
So here's one you prepared earlier.
Yeah, this was probably gripped in the 1980s. A lot of estates started blocking up grips throughout the country from probably 80s onwards, all the way right through to present day. It's been dug out with the digger and then a sod being put into the middle of the old grip, and that stopped any kind of water flow coming down. There's no bare exposed peat like there was in that big grip that we looked at earlier.
So this has filled itself here?
Yeah, this has filled itself, yeah. This is just like natural regeneration. The sphagnum moss is the main plant here. So you can see the amount of, and it's clear water, see the amount of water.
Wow.
Can come out of there, it's unbelievable.
So this in itself becomes a natural dam?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's a huge giant sponge, so this will gradually let water out all the way through the whole year. Theory that everybody wants, keepers want dry moors, but we actually really want the wetter areas like these. We find this more beneficial for us, for invertebrates, for the chicks, and then for water throughout the year as well. Sphagnum moss is fantastic for creating these bog flushes, but it's not all the being and end all. Yeah, it does store a lot of water, but in the summertime, that top, actually 3 or 4 inches of sphagnum will dry out completely and just go like tissue paper. And so that will still, if a fire came along, like it was a few years ago on Saddleworth, the fire would still pass straight over the top of the sphagnum. It won't actually put it out.
So re-wetting doesn't prevent wildfires?
No.
In another effort to promote long-term carbon sequestration, the team are also looking to cover any exposed peat areas. This is done with heather cuttings called brash.
So this is what you call brashing?
Yes, this is like another form of peatland restoration. So they put the brash down to cover the exposed peat, like you can see behind us here. Hopefully the heather seed, and they'll spread extra heather seed on this as well. And then they're going to plant several thousand sphagnum plugs in amongst this as well. So hopefully create like a little microsite for those plant species to get established now, and then cover up this bare peat so it's not got water erosion, peat washing off into the rivers, and obviously that exposure of carbon.
As Dan alluded to, it's not just carbon storage at play here. The restoration work I witnessed today will benefit the hydrology and water quality of the area. The vegetation will change and become more diverse, and the ground nesting birds will benefit from the increases of year-round insect life.
So when I was here in the winter, it was very easy to see after all of that rain how wet these moors could get. However, I returned here in the summer after a few months without rain.
Back here, Johnny, a little bit different to when you were here last time, back in winter. Yeah, this gutter here would have been probably running with water, big pools every sort of 10 metres. But here we have a man-made grip they'd probably put in the 40s or 50s. Been blocked by the digger. Digger's taken a scoop out here, created this pond and put a block in here. So we're looking to create this pond, back up and revegetate the gully behind it.
But it's dry.
But it's dried out. We're at the back end of spring, probably the driest spring on record, and there's no water on the moor, on the tops of the moor. So yeah, for the grouse and the insects, it's not good at all. The insects need that moisture to hatch out, and everything needs water to survive, to live.
So if in the summer there's still a risk of wildfire, in the winter with lots of rain, does the re-wetting stop downstream flooding?
No, it won't stop downstream flooding, but the idea is that of the moors is a massive sponge, and once that sponge is full, the water's got to go somewhere and you get that runoff. What the idea of the re-wetting is just to slow the flow down and improve the water quality, but it won't solve the flooding issue.
So Ian, the big question is it worth all the effort?
Yeah, I get it, Johnny. I think the work that we've been doing up on the moors with the re-wetting, blocking the man-made grips that were sort of put there to drain the moors, we're sort of re-wetting those areas which are creating sort of pools for the grouse and the waders to come and drink and bring the chicks for the insects. So you have an increase in insect life the wetter it is. It also slows the water down coming off the moor, so it's that sort of reducing the speed of the water coming off the moor, which is in turn going to help the flooding in the lower grounds hopefully. We're sort of locking all that carbon in there with the revegetating of the grips, reprofiling of the hags, brushing of the bare peat, stopping the runoff. So we're locking that carbon in there, holding the carbon on the moors, locking it in. Obviously the moors hold a lot of carbon anyway, they're really sort of functioning well, but we're just enhancing it and improving it all the time with this work we're doing. Also, yeah, the water quality, filtering through vegetation rather than running off bare peat. The water quality is a lot clearer coming through vegetation.
What about negatives?
Negatives, we can see like some of the areas of our moor are really wet already, which sort of stresses the heather out. And when you get stressed heather, it's susceptible to heather beetle. So the heather beetle seem to target really wet heather. The root gets stressed out, the plant gets stressed out. Really dry heather or overgrazed heather. This is where the beetle tends to target. So we're just worried in the future where we've sort of re-wetted a lot of areas that are already wet. It's going to spread the heather beetle out further and sort of stress more heather out. But that's something in time that we can look at, and hopefully, yeah, a lot of this is trial work on our ground, and over time things might change for the better, some for the worse. But yeah, the science is sort of still waiting on that, and we'll sort of keep monitoring it.
On my way back home, I'd arranged to stop in at a couple of different estates to speak with their keepers about their own peatland restoration experiences.
Does every moor need re-wetting?
Re-wetting a moorland is a huge buzzword at the moment, and given that we've had 3 successive springs really dry, you know, obviously wetness affects insect levels. All the wildlife, ground nesting birds rely on abundance of insects. So I don't think there's many keepers that would be against re-wetting. But what is very clear is that every piece of moorland is different. So on this moor here, you have areas that are naturally wetter, areas that are drier. We've got various different types of soil types, peat depths. We've got free draining areas, and then other areas that hold the water. Also, you know, that affects how much the vegetation grows. So some areas we have growth rates which are huge that, you know, if we were allowed to, we could burn or cut every 6 years. Then other areas, it might be 20, 25 years. But when you put a management plan, a blanket management plan on the whole area, you know, that's where the trouble starts.
So every part or every moor in the country is following very similar laws and guidelines?
Yes.
What would you rather?
It's not a good thing to micromanage and have to do, you know, a tiny little management structure for every bit. The practitioner on the ground should be given more free rein. He knows his ground, he knows the wet areas where the vegetation grows the most, and that just works. From doing an office-based management plan has inherent problems.
So how long has your restoration re-wetting project been going on?
It's been ongoing since 2010.
How have you found it's affected the moor over that time?
Huge benefit. Creating these wet flushes, cotton grass flushes, you can see here, unfortunately we've not had any rain for quite a while, so the water pool has eventually dried out, but you can see, I mean, looking here, these moths, invertebrates, all sorts in here. There's still a little bit of moisture in there, which you can see there's a source of something, and in a time like this where it's as dry.
That's significantly better than no water at all. What happens if there was no water? What would happen?
Well, I mean, invertebrates are key to chick survival, not just grouse. All your small birds, skylarks, meadowpipits, your curlews need damp areas to be able to probe and feed. All waders do. And the comparison of this to out there, literally just a few metres away, where it's dried out, you can imagine, anybody who's ever dug a garden over in dry weather, you don't see worms until you get down to moisture, and it's exactly the same on a moor.
Will the rewetting work stop wildfires if that's dry and this little bit's wet?
No, not a chance. I mean, you can see there's a tiny bit of moisture left in there, but once you get away from it, this sphagnum here, well, you can see it's bone dry. You'll get a wildfire coming through here, this is not going to stop it.
This will burn the same as everything else?
Yeah, and we've seen it. We've seen it at the Saddleworth fire, and we've also seen it at the Crowden fire this year, where it's entered these re-wetted areas with fire and it skips straight across. You might prevent the damage into the ground, it might make it more resilient from deep burning fires, but you'll not stop it from skipping across here and taking the whole moor.
It helps the peat, but perhaps not the vegetation.
Yeah, and the vegetation is the issue. Surface fires, surface temperatures and the dryness at the moment, it's just, it's an accident waiting to happen.
Where does rewilding fit in with rewetting?
It doesn't really. In terms of the re-wetting work that we've carried out here, there's been a great deal of time, effort and money put into it to make these moors wetter. We're retaining water, which is beneficial to everything. We're slowing down the water runoff, which is beneficial to water providers. And we all know that wet peat moorland retains 10 times more carbon than woodland.
So the woodland would suck all the water out of the ground?
Without a doubt, yeah. I mean, the argument of rewilding the uplands, clough woodlands are one thing on the steep, dry bank sides, but on these uplands, these high tops like this, we need to keep them wet. There's a huge amount of wildlife that's dependent on this environment, and take that away, it'll see the end of golden plover, it'll see the end of curlew. Without these upland areas like this, there's no hope for them.
So it's about creating a balance of wet tops, cloughs on the side and fields in the bottom.
It is, yeah. Exactly.
So you get that benefit for everything.
Yeah, you've got this open moorland up here which has been re-wetted, and it's good for all ground nesting waders and songbirds. Clough woodland, which is good for all the other bird life. We're blocking the gullies up here, we're retaining the water. Clough woodland is slowing the runoff down as well, and then down into some marginal in-by ground, which again, benefits a whole host of other wildlife.
Peatland restoration, carbon sequestration, or just moorland rewetting. Call it what you will. It's clearly important work to help slow climate change. Undoing the damage that the government funded all those years ago is a task that has been taken up with great enthusiasm by the grouse moors of Britain. That I've learned have been working towards this goal for many years. Over time, new research will show us the true value of the hard work these men and women are putting in today. And as ever, they will adapt to these findings for the benefit of conservation and the environment.